Now, there's always got to be a cause. I don't care unless you're a psychopathic person. I don't believe I'm one of those. I should be shot, but you ain't got a bullet, I guess, around handy.
He'll never be the same person. He thought he was, he was the big kahuna while he was taken down.
I picked up a weapon, I killed the woman in her sleep.
The beating started, and that was a moment frozen in time. It was like it was endless. It seemed to last for an eternity, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't run, I couldn't move, I couldn't think.
This man planned and engineered a brutal killing. He is serving life without parole for 25 years. We will meet him next on The Criminal Mind. Hello, I'm Fanny Kiefer. On this edition of The Criminal Mind, we look at the frightening connection between psychopathy and violent criminal behavior. We will discover how a psychopath thinks, what drives them, and why it is so easy for a psychopath to commit a terrible crime. We'll also take you inside a prison to meet a lifer, a young man who played a deadly mind game and lost. One word of warning: parts of the program are graphic and disturbing. Please use viewer discretion. In 1987, 3 young men entered a family home in a suburban neighborhood. They attacked a sleeping couple and their 15-year-old daughter. The mother was bludgeoned to death with a tire iron. The father and daughter were viciously beaten with a baseball bat. Somehow, they survived. One of the 3 attackers was the son of the very family he tried to kill. His motive was money. If the family died, he would inherit nearly $500,000. He did not act alone. A master manipulator helped him plan and carry out the attack. That man is now serving life without possibility of parole for 25 years. His name is Doug.
You have to take responsibility for your own actions. And that was a tough lesson to learn, that I am the one who is responsible for my actions. Nobody forced me into this.
We started by getting some background on Doug's early life. This prison interview was conducted by forensic psychologist Dr. Douglas Adams.
Home life was not a terrific home life. The stress of my father's employment. My father was an alcoholic, physically abusive.
To whom?
To myself and my siblings.
So what was it like for you experiencing him doing that?
It was scary. It was scary. My father was a very large man, and it was very intimidating. I lived in the shadow of fear. You didn't backtalk. You didn't venture an opinion because it wouldn't be accepted, his way or no way at all.
And what kind of things would he do?
Punching and...
Punching closed fist.
Closed fists or open hands.
Open hand where?
To the head. Held down and belted. Coat hangers, belts.
Coat hangers.
Switches, willow switches.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of behaviors would he respond that way to?
If you talk back, if you spoke up when you weren't supposed to.
So very abusive.
It was. But there were some good times as well. Like, I don't want to just paint a picture that that's the way it was all the time.
In some way, the moments that kind of stick out for me are this posturing by his drunken father and this intimidation and the modeling of that throughout his childhood that really is teaching this kid, you fight or be beaten, you dominate or be dominated. I think that led him into a lot of what he did.
Doug's father traveled a lot and left his mother home with Doug and his younger brother and sister.
I always felt that I needed to be better, that I was not good enough, but I had to take it one step higher. I always had to improve. There was no second place. There was no room for second place. There was only first place.
Did you ever have any problems with violence in those?
No, not really. I mean, other than schoolyard shenanigans. Like I had a couple incidences of fisticuffs, but it was never serious violence. It was like 4 or 5 shots, and then both parties backed away. Nobody was really injured. Maybe your ego was a little bruised. Now my dad was screwing around with my mom. She found out about it. Get out. He was in the wrong. He knew it. I felt a lot of animosity, a lot of anger towards my stepmother. How could she step in and break up my parents? And I turned around and I challenged the authority of my stepmother. I wasn't going to accept it. My father wasn't around. What was she going to do? I was starting to get bigger. And she was just as abusive. The straw that broke that snapped it, was she was punishing my brother because she could. My brother told her that I hadn't taken this thing. And I had said to my stepmother, I had taken this thing. It's my fault. You're going to punish somebody, come and punish me. And she went into hysterics and tried to beat my brother. I took away her bungee cord and I locked her in a closet. And she was in the closet for almost 12 hours.
How did that feel?
Invigorating. It felt good. It felt like I had some power. I had a little bit of control again. The effects were very devastating on her. You know, in reflection, I look back and I see that. But I didn't think of that at the time.
So then what happened?
She came out and she was pathetic. It was like she was broken. She just sobbed and sobbed.
Was she scared of you?
I don't think she was scared of me because I didn't slap her, I didn't hit her. I just physically pushed her into the closet and locked her in.
You know, I asked him, what do you think she felt? Do you think she was scared of you? And he says, well, no, I don't really think so. And, you know, my sense is she must have been very frightened. He doesn't seem to have understood that. So what I'm getting is that his sense of empathy was impaired.
Doug's father split up with his stepmother and sent the kids to live with his real mother and her new husband. He challenged the authority of his stepfather this time and pushed his mother to the limit.
Like, she tried to keep the apron strings on, and that's what I was pushing away from. I wanted to show her I'm my own person. But she was still there, and I knew she was there. I could do all sorts of cruddy things. Like when I was caught, I was arrested during the break-and-enter spree. The fellow that I was with, we pulled about 12 of them in the span of 3 months. There was a whole new world out here that I was just starting to see. I was just starting to awaken to. That world being narcotics and a sense of rebelling against authority. Like I felt like I'd been under the authoritarian thumb the whole time. And now it was like I was free.
When he graduated from high school, he worked at low-paying jobs. He was stealing from his employers and getting fired. Booze and drugs played a big role, and at 6'5", 300 pounds, violence was easy.
One of the people I beat on really well, and I don't know whether or not he was taken to the hospital. I didn't care. It wasn't my problem. I won that fight. No room for second place.
And how many nights a week would you be drunk?
Maybe 3. Maybe 3 nights a week.
And drugs the other nights, or sober the other nights?
No, drugs all the time. Every day.
All
Drugs.
day, every day?
All day, every day. Go to work high.
Then what happened?
Well, I started to manipulate the people that were around me for money, for drugs. I was telling them, well, hey man, if you want to hang out with me and you want to be cool, you know, you'll do that. You'll go and grab me some cash. Many of my friends were older than I was. Like people, drifters, people that hadn't found their way in the world. And I drew them to me, knowing what they were, knowing what I was. And to make myself feel better, I put them down, so that I was like king of the losers.
The manipulation escalated when Doug got together with a young man who sparked the tragedy that followed.
I had started to get to know him better, because the more he told me about himself, the more leverage I had for the manipulation. So I started pushing those buttons, and he started to get very hostile, very angry, not towards me. So I tried to get to the root of the problem. And he had a lot of unresolved issues from his childhood, and his hostility was directed at his own family.
In a moment on The Criminal Mind, the plan behind the crime and the bloody attack. The crime was brutal and bloody. The mother dead, the father and daughter severely injured. Doug planned the crime and he disposed of the evidence, but he didn't hit any of the victims. In the words of his co-accused, he chickened out. Again, we caution you, parts of this program are graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
It appears, at least at the time of the offending, that this fellow didn't have well-developed empathy skills, didn't realize the impact of his actions on the world in the sense of having any concern about that.
Like I say, I had encouraged the hostility. I had fueled that. And he says, I want to get rid of them. And I says, well, go ahead. You know, it's no skin off my back. And he went, well, would you help me? And I says, to a limited extent. Because I was like the puppet master, pulling the strings. And that gave me a feeling of power that was lacking. We're going to take him out. And sort of inside I didn't really think he'd had the nerve. I didn't think he had the balls. I thought, yeah, show me what you've got. You want to show me you're a tough guy? Let's see what you've got. So we drove past the place. Lights were still on. We came back an hour later. That constituted the plan, because we came back an hour later. I walked in ahead of them into his room. I turned on the light and I turned around and sort of gave him that mocking look. Show me. And he showed me. They went into the master bedroom, equipped with a baseball bat and a tire iron. And I sort of shrugged it off. I felt high. I felt nothing's going to happen. I thought this was going to be the greatest tool that I could use, because he built it up so far and then he backed down. But again, I still think part of me said, he can do this. But I ignored that. And the beating started. And that was a moment frozen in time. It was like it was endless. It seemed to last for an eternity. And I was paralyzed. I couldn't run. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was just there. I didn't feel anything. I felt terrified. How could this be happening? It was like all the drugs washed from my system. He came into the hall and he was brandishing a baseball bat covered in blood. And he says, you have to do this. It's your turn. And I went, no, I can't do that. The object of that beating was a minor, and I just couldn't see myself doing this.
Doug ran out. The son beat his 15-year-old sister until the baseball bat broke in two. He then tried to disguise the crime by setting fire to the house.
And I could still hear the screams. And part of me said, stop this. You can stop this. You have the power to stop this. And I said, yeah. So I ran back into the house to get my other co-accused out. And I came face to face with one of the victims. And he looked right at me. And I couldn't take it. He didn't look real. He just didn't look real. And he was looking right at me, and it was just a vacant expression. And I don't know if I yelled or if I tried to yell, but I turned and I ran back to the car. We passed by a police cruiser on the way out back to Vancouver. I said, just relax, be calm. They were both covered in blood.
The three spent that night in a hotel. They were in shock. The next day, they went home and were arrested.
And then One of the policemen said to me that one of the strangest thing, he says, you know, he says only one of the three died. He says all three of them didn't die. And I couldn't believe it. I thought all three of them were dead. I thought 3 people had died. I started to cry. I felt relief, I felt scared, I felt many different emotions. And I said, which of the victims died? And he told me.
Next on The Criminal Mind, what goes through the mind of a psychopath? Psychopathy is a personality disorder. It is found in a small number of people, but it can have a devastating impact on society. We know the high-profile names like Clifford Olson and Paul Bernardo. However, not all psychopaths are violent. They live and work with you and me.
For psychopaths, status is everything. The need to dominate other people, to control them, to be a winner. And it's interesting that Doug uses words similar to that effect throughout his interview.
Steve Hart is an expert on psychopathy. He is a professor of psychology at Simon Fraser University, and his professional interest in Doug's case began soon after the crime was committed.
Psychopathy is a specific form of personality disorder, and it's characterized by symptoms like being superficial, egocentric, manipulative, lacking remorse, lacking empathy, failing to accept responsibility for your own actions, being impulsive, irresponsible, bad-tempered, and engaging in delinquent and criminal behavior.
Doug agreed to this interview because he thought he could help younger people avoid his pattern of criminal behavior. He consented to the interview knowing that our topic was psychopathy. It is important to remember we are not diagnosing Doug.
In general, there are 2 features that really describe human relations, or 2 dimensions that bond people in society. And one of them has to do with status or authority relations, power relations among people. And the other one really has to do with emotional relations or nurturing type relationships. And what we tend to see in psychopaths is a complete lack of emotional or nurturant type relations. They seem to be devoid of emotions or the capacity to feel strong emotions and emotional bonds. If something terrible happens around them, they can feel afraid. But they tend not to have long-lasting emotions like depression, like anxiety, like love. And if you lack capacity for emotions like this, you're really left with one dimension to relate to other people, which is status relationships. When he talks about work history, there's a very good example of some things that are typical in offenders generally and in psychopaths specifically, things that we would look for. One of them is a tendency to minimize or deny antisocial behavior, and to try to give excuses for those kinds of behavior in a rather superficial way. To him, it's all just part of a big picture. Yeah, I was a reliable, conscientious employee. Apart from the fact that I beat people up at work, I stole from my employer, I used alcohol and drugs, and I showed up late for work every day. There's an inconsistency between the affect that he displays during the interview and what he's talking about. He tries deliberately to keep a fixed facial expression, yet he's talking about an incredible range of subjects in terms of emotional content, yet his facial expression changes little, if at all. And if you turn down the volume, you would find it difficult or almost impossible to tell what he was talking about at any given point in time. One of the disturbing things in watching an interview like this is how little you actually end up knowing about this young man who committed such brutal crimes.
Not all psychopaths commit horrendous crimes. In fact, some don't commit any crimes at all. People who are successful in business or politics or the stock market could be psychopathic. And psychopaths don't care about who they hurt to get what they want. Dr. Robert Hare is a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia. He is a world-renowned expert in psychopathy. He is the author of Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of Psychopaths Among Us, a chilling journey through the minds of notorious killers and everyday hustlers.
The average person has no way of knowing whether or not he or she's dealing with a psychopath. I don't. I can be taken in just as easily as anybody else can. The only way we can find out what we're dealing with is to gather lots of information, put it all together from different sources, and say, aha, this individual is not acting in my best interest. It's in his or her best interest. Much of our behavior is actually determined by the impact and effect it will have upon the rest of society, particularly our relatives, friends, and so on. But for the psychopath, we've got to understand that these individuals are not concerned about what happens to other people, they're concerned only with what happens to themselves. She's watching the screen and being told to blink periodically.
About 13 years ago, Bob Hare and his students developed a way to standardize the identification of psychopaths. They came up with the Psychopathy checklist. It is now being used worldwide to recognize psychopaths after they are caught. The challenge is to identify this disorder before the individual starts offending.
Well, we don't know whether it's biological, the result of socialization and so on, probably some sort of interaction, combination of the two. And the problem is we don't have enough research.
Doug has been inside for 9 of his 29 years. His first parole hearing is in 2012. He was married in prison, and his daughter was conceived during a conjugal visit.
I want to reemerge into society and make a life for myself and for my family now. I couldn't see the road from where I was before, I just wandered. And if this helps other people see that road, maybe they can turn off before they come as far as I have. And you don't want to grow up in a prison. You want to grow up here, because this isn't any kind of life.
In future programs, we'll explore the roots of criminal behavior, from small-time hustlers to sophisticated con artists, from petty thieves and serial rapists to white-collar criminals. We'll take you inside the criminal mind. I'm Fanny Kiefer.